This conference will now be recorded.
Anyone, any questions out here? Again, I still understand that there are a couple of
Hi, sir.
people who are facing, yeah, sorry, just a second. I still understand that there are a couple of people who are facing issues while doing a git commit. They're getting that issue telling that user and password out there, user and sorry, email out there. Again, I'm not responding back to those emails. I'm telling that please do a Google search and etc. Reason being, I want you all to now start searching. I want you all to do a lot of search right now. This is where you need to, let's say, use all your Google skills, go to YouTube, search out. You'll get the answers. Try finding the answers out here. Still not able to find it? Let me know. I'll help you out there. Yes, any questions? It is, if you want a single file to be cloned, no, you will have to clone the entire repository. Clone is an option that you have to give, let's say, the entire repository as such. If you want a single file, download is the option. You can just go download into the repository. Like if you go into the repository out there, yes, local Git database will not come into picture. The local Git database won't come into picture. But if you are really interested to do something like that, let's say I just download this out. Okay, one particular file. I'm just doing a simple file out here, downloading this out here. And once I download this out, and let's put this inside a folder. So I just put it in a folder. I do not have a local Git database out here, nothing. And if you are just, or if you just want to track the changes to one particular file out there, let's do one thing. Let's say open a folder. And in this folder, I have these files. And what you can do is that control N or terminal out here, open the terminal. And here, just switch the terminal back to git bash. And inside this particular terminal, say git init, git space init, initialize. So it's now telling initializing an empty git repository. All these changes will now be tracked. All these changes, you can go ahead and track all these changes. Again, if you want to just commit this out, just say git add dot or get add a all and say git commit. And all these blank files are being committed and all that stuff. You can give your own comment and say test and say insert and all that stuff. So you can give your comment and all that stuff, and you can give a commit message, and then you can go ahead and commit this out so that you'll now be able to track all these things. You can start committing and all these things. You can track all these changes if you do a git init, local git database. Then you can commit it and all that stuff. You will get a local master. You will get a local master, let's say copy. You can go and track all these things. So for any file, you can do this. You don't even have to get connected to the central server. For any file in your machine, you can start doing all these things out here. Yes, any more questions here? Anyone? Any more questions here?
Hi, sir.
Hi,
Go ahead,
Kiran.
please.
Hello.
Go ahead, Shiva. Okay, Shiva, go ahead. Saikiran, I'll just come back to you. Just a second.
In real-time scenario, we have created one pull request, and that is going to TL. That person is check the code or not. Is there any bugs or it is correct or not?
Mhm.
Is there
Okay,
any
are you
process?
asked? Oh, sorry, can you come again, please?
We created one request that is going to TL to commit that.
Okay.
In that process, the TL is it check that code or not? That
Is
is
it
correct or not?
code or not? Yes,
Yeah.
he has to check the code. He basically has to check the code as such out there.
Okay. And one more doubt.
Mhm.
In main branch, we reverted
Okay.
one or two lines. We reverted that that line also. removed from test branch or only main branch?
No, it will only be main branch. If you want that line to be removed from the test branch, you'll have to again do a pull request. You'll have to merge your main branch into the test branch out there.
Okay.
Yes. Saikin, you can go ahead now. You had a question.
Sorry, as you said before, while raising the
Mhm.
ticket, we have to use the Azure portal, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So here, DevOps portal was my credential was different, and Azure portal credential was different. So
Mhm.
I have a small issue in repos area.
Okay.
So how can I raise the ticket, and how they will find out to me?
So when you raise a ticket, right? When you select the service called Azure Devops, they're going sorry, they're going to ask you things like what is the name of your organization? What is the name of your project? These are the two fields you'll have to fill up. And once you fill it up, then they'll be able to tell you, okay, fine, what is the issue with your repository and all these things out there.
So there is no problem at all credentials.
No, there is no problem with the credentials at all. Yes, any more questions? Okay, let's take something. Okay, how to revert using the VS Code? Again, using the VS Code, you will have to create a branch, and you will have to, let's say, revert the changes out here. It's not a straightforward process. So reverts, I would say it's best when you do it on Azure DevOps, and then it says something like, "Hi Kiran, after we revert back, why another folder is being created?" No, it's not a folder. It's a branch that is getting created. So whenever you revert, Azure has to know how do you want to revert, right? Or what do you want to revert. So they create a staging branch. We call it as a staging branch, a temporary branch out here, which you will use to take all the changes that you want to revert and then do a pull request into the main branch out here. So any change or delete will happen through a pull request. If you just click on the revert button, instead of you going manually creating a branch and doing all these things, DevOps is going to help you create all these branches and all these things out here as such. Any more questions here? All right. So one of the biggest question someone really has while starting with, let's say, a DevOps practice, and especially in the repository, is that you know what? Uh, if you're creating a test branch, you're doing nothing but you're making a copy of it and putting a test branch out here. So why do we need so many branches as such? Why do you have to, let's say, deal with so many branches? What is the significance of having so many branches out here as such? That's where branching and merging strategy comes into picture. Branching and merging strategy out here. Any project that you work with, any organization that you work with, will have a proper branching strategy. Will tell you what branch to be used, how it needs to be used, and so on and so forth. For which, that's where I'll start with. Any repository that you start will have a main branch. That's the very simple, or that's the very first branch that you have. You can call it as a main or master. Neither say master or main, anything is the same. So let's create a new repository today. Let's go there, and let's say, for assumption, for this particular, let's say, assumption, I'm telling that we are all working under an organization called Google, under a project called Android. Okay, we are developers of Android. That's what we are doing. So let's go there and say this is Android, something like this, and I'll just go ahead and create this particular repository. So as and when I create the repository, I'll have what? A main branch out here. Usually main branch is a backup branch. It's a backup, which means no developer should be allowed to directly commit into a main branch. Meaning, I don't want any developer to just go ahead and, let's say, use the main branch. I'm using this as a backup, like a backup folder. So this main branch, by the thumb rule, should contain code ready for production. which means whatever code is running on your application, like on your web app, that code should be saved here. That is, let's say, the thumb rule, because if something happens, I can take from this backup and I can redeploy it on my web application and it will start running. So we maintain main or a master as a backup branch out here, just for backup scenarios. For regular developmental activities, meaning we are all developers. What we do, we develop the code on a regular basis. That's what we do. We code, we develop, and all that stuff. For regular developmental activities, an organization tells you to use something called as a development branch or a develop branch. We just call it as a develop branch out here. So what I can do is I can now go ahead, create a develop branch, and what I'll say is that this is develop, and let's say we are working on an Android version called 9.0. We are developing Android version called 9.0. So I'll say /9.0 out here, based on what, the main branch. I'll say create this out here. Do you see how it's now getting created? The branch name is 9.0, sitting under a folder called develop, which is under a repository called Android. If you want to create one more, say develop test, the branch will become test, sitting under a folder called develop. So you can put all the branches under one folder. It will be easier for you to manage. For management perspective, instead of directly creating develop, you can say develop out here. So let me delete this out. So if I want to delete a branch, just click on this one, just scroll down or just scroll up, say delete the branch out here, say delete this out. So delete, you can delete your branches as such out there. So here I'm telling two things. One is that all the developmental activities should go into the develop 9.0, and main branch should be just acting as a backup branch, and no commits are allowed here. Sorry, no commits are supposed, or no developer is supposed to use the main branch out here. So what I'll do is that I will lock my branch. There is something called branch lock that you can apply. How you can do that? Just come down here, click on more options on the branch, lock. You'll have a lock symbol out here. Now my main branch is my default branch. It's no longer my default branch. It's just a backup branch. I want my develop to be a default branch. So what I can do, click on this. I'll just say scroll, set as default branch. So now the tag shifts to develop, because develop right now is your default branch for all the developmental activities. So let's diagrammatically put this in. So you have a repository and you have a branch inside a repository. It's called main, and main is locked. This is logged out here. And also you have something known as what? Develop 9.0. This is a branch that you have. Version 9.0, something like this. I'll say 9.0 out here. And this is the branch what all the developers need to use in your organization. Again, we are all the developers right now who are in this organization right now. So let's put some developers here. Let's put multiple machines. Each and every machine represents one developer out here as such. So all of us are now supposed to use the develop branch, because main branch is any which way is logged. Even if you try to commit onto the main branch, you'll simply get an error telling that, you know what, the branch is logged. I cannot let you commit this out here as such. Now, just imagine this. You are a developer one. There is some code here. You're downloading or you're cloning this out into your machine. I am also cloning it. Someone else is also cloning it. There are now 3 copies of the same code out here. If all of us commit directly onto the developer, there is going to be something known as a conflict which arises. Because you might be editing the same file, I am also editing the same file, someone else is also editing the same file out here. You will not in this case have a control on what is going inside and what is coming outside your branch. Also, as we were seeing yesterday, if a developer is allowed to do a direct commit onto the develop branch, imagine there are 10,000 lines of code that went inside a commit. If I want to undo it, and if I'm allowing a direct commit, imagine how difficult it would be. Which is the reason why, to avoid conflicts and to allow me to redo the commits, I would say that no direct commits are allowed onto the develop branch. Every commit we do needs to come from a pull request. Everything that we need to do comes from a pull request, for which I start applying something called as what? Branch policies. I apply, or we normally go ahead and do application of something known as branch policies, which will discourage a developer to directly go ahead and commit onto this particular develop branch out here. So let's do that. So let's go back into the Azure portal, the DevOps portal. And this is the 9.0. And are there policies right now? No. How can we tell whether the policy is there or not? You will have a badge, exactly. If you have a policy, you will have a badge here. So I'll click on this one and I'll say, just scroll down. I'll say branch policies. I'll just put one policy out here telling that I at least need one reviewer to approve this particular change, meaning to approve the pull request out here. I'll say yes, and I'll say one reviewer. And what I will do here in this demo is I'll take this option telling allow requester to approve their own change. Because see, I am the only user in this particular DevOps organization. If I don't check this option, right, I will never be able to, let's say, do some pull request out here. But in a real time scenario, you will never and never check this out. You will never and never check this out, because if I am raising the pull request and I am approving the same thing, what is, let's say, the use of doing all these things out here, right? So I'll say allow this one for now. I'm good with that. Just go back. Now I have one policy which is protecting my branch, which will discourage me to do direct commits out here. So if I go here, say direct commit, selling pushes to this branch are not allowed out here as such. So great. So what initially we do is that we give this developer an option, or we, let's say, lock all these branches and all that stuff. Let's say leave, put the policy, and this is where your work as a DevOps engineer is, let's say, coming to an end, because you are creating the branches, or you are creating the repository. You're creating the branches of the repository, and also you apply policies and locks on the branch wherever and whenever needed. Now, I as a developer, I have some code on my machine. I have some code, some .NET code basically that I do have. I want to push all this .NET code into this particular branch called develop 9.0 via a pull request, because direct commits are not any which ways allowed. So I cannot do this. So which means I need to create my own branch as a developer. I need to go ahead, create a branch called test branch and so on and so forth. All the branches what developers create in their local machine to go ahead and raise a pull requests are called feature branches. Because a developer normally works on a feature, as we very first saw in the class. There's something called feature, there is something called work items, and etc. I as a developer go ahead and start working on something known as a feature out here. So let's go there. Let's see what will happen. Firstly, in order to, let's say, do all these operations, I'll clone this branch. So I'll firstly go back, I'll go into the branch, I'll clone this out, clone in VS Code, open VS Code, I'll say open this URL, and let's go into, let's say, this particular folder. Let's say clone this out, and let's open this out here. And I have that particular readme.md file right now inside a folder called Android, which is nothing but a branch in my local. I have, if I just go here, I have Android. Inside that I have a .kit folder, and I have that particular readme file out here. Let's say I have some code. For example, let's see if I have some .NET code to, let's say, do a sample. So I have a .NET Core sample code. This is something that I have written in a Visual Studio. Again, you don't really need to download Visual Studio again and write all these things out uh, in a repository. I'll just go there also. You have this one, and let's go there and let's go to code samples. Yes, you have this particular link that I'll give you. You can just go ahead and download this out. You can just go ahead into this repository, click on these three dots, say download as a zip, and unzip this out so that you get this folder on your machine, which is a .NET Core sample app, which has all these things like the SLN file, the CS project files, and all that stuff. What I'll do, very simple, is I'll copy this folder. And this is my, let's say, let's say Git repository where I downloaded or where I cloned. I'll go here. I'll just paste the folder out here. I'm just dragging and dropping that folder into my repository so that Git can now start tracking all the changes. Git can now understand what are the changes and all these things out. And the branch I'm working on is what? It's a develop. But I cannot directly commit onto the develop. So what I'll do, I'll say create a branch from develop, which is called a feature branch. And whenever you create a feature branch as a developer or a DevOps engineer, we follow a particular naming convention. Something like this. I'll say feature my name or my email ID. I'll say Kiran. I'll say hyphen the work item that I'm working on, or let's say what I'm working on. I'm doing a code push. I'll say code push. This will become the name of the branch. Again, you can follow any convention. You can say code push and then feature and all that stuff. The reason we do this convention is to identify whose branch is this, how are they doing and all that stuff. I'll say enter. I will say clone it from what? The develop branch. And now I checked out into what? Feature Kiran code push out here. Good, great, not great. And now here, there are a lot of uncommitted changes. All these are my code that I pushed. There are about what? 68 changes that are pending. I will stage all these changes firstly. So click on stage all. I'll say this is a code push. Commit it out. Then publish the branch so that this branch gets reflected on Azure DevOps out there. So publishing this branch out here, and then I think the branch is now published. Let's go back and okay, let's go back into Android repository. Let's go into branches. Now I have a feature branch that is published. I can now go ahead create a pull request into what? The develop 9.0. And if you see this, there are about 68 files out here. The reason why we use VS Code is because it's easy to go ahead and let's say push all the files under one commit. If you are doing it on the Azure DevOps directly, you would have had 68 commits out here. It's difficult for you to let's say go ahead work on each and every file. Reason being, we prefer going via the VS Code route and committing all these things out. So I'll say, okay, fine, great, all this is good. And this is a code push. This is the name of the commit message that is coming from my local machine. I'll say create this out. And once I create it out, now there is a policy here telling there should be at least one person who needs to approve it. Now my lead will come into picture. Check this out, or the development lead will come into picture. Check this out. Understand whether you have written it right, whether everything is right. Then goes it sets approve. As and when this is approved, Developers are recommended to complete it and then delete this branch. You don't need so many branches out there. Imagine there are hundreds of developers who are working. Each and every hour they are working on something. By the end of the day, there will be thousands of feature branches out here. So it will become very difficult for me to manage all these things. So it is recommended to delete a feature branch. Reason being, feature branches are called short-lived branch. Just for one purpose, for a developmental activity, just to improve your code or to develop your code, feature branches are created and also deleted after the code development is done. So now the pull request is getting merged into what? The develop 9.0 out here. And here I have done a PR 113. So if I now go into my, let's say, repository, now I have my code, and now I have also the merge that I did on this particular code, which is around 113 PR out here. Yes, any questions still here? So just to recap, we have a repository, main branch is logged, develop branch has policies. As a developer, I go ahead create something known as what? Feature branches out here. Raise a pull request into my develop branch, and once the pull request is raised, this feature branch is deleted. It's a short-lived branch, and all my code is now inside the develop 9.0 out here of my repository as such. Yes, any questions that I can take till here? Mhm. By mistake, if there is something which is committed on develop, firstly, you cannot commit on develop directly because you have a policy. You will have to come via a pull request. When you do a pull request, there is someone who's reviewing it. By mistake, even that someone who's reviewing it is telling, okay, fine, let it go and all that stuff, and then you commit it, then you revert it back. In future, sorry? Yes, it is possible.